Standard of New Jersey, which became Esso and later Exxon, now part of ExxonMobil. Standard of New York, which became Mobil, now part of ExxonMobil. And Standard of Ohio, which became Ohio, and now part of BP. And also Pennzoil and Chevron have remained separate companies. So all these companies came out of Standard Oil. And that's only a few. Those are the most well-known companies. But these are the major players. These were the bankers behind writing this Federal Reserve Act. Wilson's regret. Here you see President's signature enacts currency law, declares it's the first of a series of constructive aids constructive acts to aid business. He made a speech to Democratic leaders. He sees the dawn of a new era in business. It was a new era in business. This is what he said later on. I am the most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated the growth of the nation. Therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. No longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the voice of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men. That was what he said when he realized what he had done. But he did it for political power. The banking cartel, the Federal Reserve, a privately owned Rothschild central banking cartel, charging taxpayers interest on money they print out of thin air since 1913. What is a cartel? A consortium of independent organizations formed to limit competition by controlling the production and distribution of a product or service. Well, the product that they control is money. So they are essentially a cartel, a banking cartel. Who's members of the cartel? And how do we know that the Rothschilds are involved? J.W. McAllister, an oil industry insider with House of Saud, of course, in Saudi Arabia, House of Saud connections, wrote in the Grim Reaper that information he acquired from the Saudi bankers cited 80% ownership of the New York Federal Reserve Bank, by far the most powerful Fed branch, by just 8 families, 4 of which reside in the U.S. Goldman Sachs, Rockefellers, Lehman's, and Kuhn-Loebs of New York, the Rothschilds of Paris and London, the Warburgs of Hamburg, the Lazards of Paris, and Israel Moses of Rome, Israel Moses Sif of Rome. CPA Thomas D. Schauf corroborates McAllister's claims, adding that 10 banks control all 12 Federal Reserve branches. He named N.M. Rothschild of London, Rothschild Bank of Berlin, Warburg Bank of Hamburg, Warburg Bank of Amsterdam, Lehman Brothers of New York, Lazard Brothers of Paris, Kuhn-Loeb Bank of New York, Israel Moses Sif Bank of Italy, Goldman Sachs, and J.P. Morgan Chase of New York. Schauf lists William Rockefeller, Paul Warburg, Jacob Schiff, and James Stillman as individuals who own large shares of the Fed. The Schiffs are insiders at Kuhn-Loeb. The Stillmans are Citigroup insiders who married into the Rockefeller plan at the turn of the century. These are the people that control the banking. What are they doing? This is how money is created. Remember we talked about that first $1,000 where it came from? How does it get created? First, Congress says, all right, we need $1 billion. We got a war going on. We need $1 billion. So they contact the Treasury. They say, look, we need $1 billion. The Treasury then goes to the Federal Reserve and says, we want to borrow $1 billion. What they do is they print up some nice looking paper, with fancy writing on it, and call them U.S. bonds, and they give them to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve in turn, now these are interest-bearing bonds. The Federal Reserve in turn gives them $1 billion. Not cash money. What do? They credit $1 billion in the bank in their name. All they've done is type some numbers on the computer. Now there's $1 billion on it. Now the federal government can issue checks, like my Social Security check now. I can get that. You know, if you're working for the government, you get your check. All of this comes now. There was no money. There was no money. All it was now, there was an entry because, and if you read actually in the publication called Money Mechanics, that's printed by the Federal Reserve, and they state that if you and I write a check, there has to be some money in the bank to cover that check. When the Federal Reserve writes a check, there's nothing. They just wrote a check. And they deposit that in the bank. Now the Treasury now is able to issue, write checks against that deposit. People now go to the bank, cash the check, and the bank then clears that check through the Federal Reserve. Money is created out of debt. Now, the interesting thing is that Treasury note is interest bearing. The Fed is the only place where you can get money. Where does the money come from to pay the interest? Because the only money that's in circulation is the principal. So now, to get the interest, you have to go back to the Fed and borrow more money. It's a never-ending cycle. It's a debt that can never be paid. It can never be paid. That's why it's not sustainable. The debt can never be paid because there's never enough money in circulation to pay the interest. So they have to continue to borrow money. Now, where does the interest, how does the interest get paid? The interest gets paid off your tax money. So, money is created from debt. The more debt, the more money. This is the increasing money supply. From 1959 to 2007. You see that the angle is ever increasing. The increase in money supply represents an increase in debt and a decrease in dollar value. The result is a lower standard of living. Literally, they're taking money out of your pocket. They're not taking it out physically, but the money in your pocket, even as you sit here right now, it is decreasing in value. You know, if you've been around as long as me, you know that, say, the 10-cent bag of potato chips that I bought when I was a kid now costs $1. Most everything from the time that I was growing up costs 10 times as much today. A pack of cigarettes, I used to go to the store to get my father a pack of cigarettes, it was 35 cents a pack. How much is it now? $7? $9. From 35 cents to $9. Okay. Gallon of gas was 30 cents a gallon. Now we're happy. We're overjoyed that it's under $3 a gallon. You know, we think we're getting a bargain because it's under $3 a gallon. So this is the hidden tax. This is why, see, this is why the government is willing to do business with this cartel, with this banking cartel. Because now they can spend, and they don't have to come to you and say, well, we're raising your taxes. Because if they say, yeah, we're going to raise your taxes, you won't vote for them. And the job of a politician is to get reelected. That's his main job, is to get reelected. So this is the hidden tax. This is how they tax you by inflation and causing not the prices to go up, really, but it causes the value of the dollar to go down. It's a transfer of wealth because all of that interest eventually has to go back to the bank. The interest on the debt financing your taxes. Your labor the labor of 90% of the people is going to create the wealth of the 10%. And it's theft of the highest order. It's all it is. It's rob from the poor and give to the rich. Robin Hood in reverse. And this cycle is happening. You get paid your wages. You purchase from businesses. You pay interest. Your taxes pay interest. Their taxes pay interest. It goes back to the banks. That's where it came from. You got nowhere else to go. This is why I call it the melt up rather than the melt down. Because the flow of wealth is upward from the masses up to the elite. This is where the money is going. When, in 2008, we had the big financial crisis, they had the bailout. And Wall Street was paying bonuses of hundreds of millions of dollars for essentially crashing their company. I mean, I wish I could own a company, run it into the ground, and get a bonus. This is what happened in 2008. But, you know, what that one writer said, rather than allow the country to go into a recession, they kick the can down the street. Okay? Let the next generation, let the next president handle it, let the next Congress handle it. This is what's happening. It is a transfer, the greatest transfer of wealth delivery in human history. This is what's happening today. It's inevitable. The money supply increases, the dollar becomes worth less and less until suddenly it becomes worthless. Hyperinflation occurs and panic ensues. They've got hyperinflation in I think, Argentina. Hyperinflation. What happens with hyperinflation? It means your money becomes so inflated that it literally starts to cost thousands of dollars to buy a loaf of bread. Hyperinflation. Why will you have it? Why is it inevitable? Because you cannot continue to increase the money supply. I mean, the dollar now is worth probably somewhere around a penny relative to the 1913 dollar. So at some point, it just becomes worthless. It becomes of no value at all. So what happens? Bankruptcy. Government shut down. Unable to borrow more money, the federal government will be forced to shut down all but the most essential services. Martial law comes. Streets of America were patrolled by strong military presence. Now this is a possible scenario. Why do I think it is a probable scenario? The United States government has they've literally bought enough rounds of ammunition to shoot everybody in the United States 3 times. I mean, this is on record. You can go look this up. I ain't making this up. They've bought portable, what they call checkpoints, literally ready to put in place. If you look around, your police departments have become militarized. You have police departments now that have tanks. You go on the internet, you can find railroad trains full of military equipment that are crisscrossing the United States right now. Military tanks and half-tracks and all this military equipment, because they're preparing for a financial crisis. If we may not think it's happening, they know it's going to happen, you know. So this, in my opinion, will be what happens. You're going to have martial law, you're going to have bankruptcy. California, the state of California is almost bankrupt right now. So they won't be able to borrow money. Right now, they borrow money from China. China probably is the biggest lender. And what they've done, they'll issue U.S. bonds to China. China will give them some money. Now, when the bonds roll over, when they mature, the government is going back and they ask them to roll over the bonds and accept dollars for the interest. But sooner or later, they're not going to want to accept dollars. They're going to want gold. Well, you know, heard about the gold in Fort Knox? It ain't there. It's been gone. It's been gone. And it hasn't been audited since the 1950s. Since the 1950s. The solution, take the money and run. Okay? While your dollars still have some value, while the dollars that you have still have some value, my opinion, you need to invest in something that will enable you to survive when that value is gone. Because trust me, when that value is gone, what are you going to do? How are you going to eat? Land, again, in my opinion, the one thing that can provide you with the basics of food and shelter. You know, some people say, well, I'm going to invest in gold. Well, that might be pretty good, except that the bankers can manipulate the price of gold. The other thing is, you can't eat gold. Okay? Gold is not digestible. So, you need to think about survival, not just, you know, having creature comforts. Survival is essentially going to be what we'll be thinking about in a financial crisis such as this. There are three places I think that you can be. You can be in an urban environment. An urban environment is your least safest place. Okay? Because in an urban environment, you're dependent upon someone else to feed you. Most of us live in the cities. We don't have much of a garden. We don't have much of an area to grow a garden. You may have an area where you can grow a little bit of food, but probably not enough to feed your family. An urban area is the last place you want to be in a situation like this. A rural area is next. A rural area in the United States, at least you'll be able to grow some food. The other thing you have to think about is people that don't have food, you need to be able to protect the food that you have. Okay, so you might want some greens and some guns. My preference is some land outside of the United States. Why? Number one, it's cheaper. I can get more land for my dollar right now. And trust me, most of us, the money that we make, how much is left over? Hardly any. Let alone enough to go out and buy some land somewhere. So there are places where you can buy land because the exchange rate is favorable. But when the collapse comes, listen, the collapse is going to affect the entire planet. It's not just going to affect America, it's going to affect the world. Because America, the dollar is the reserve currency for the world. So when the dollar crashes, it's going to mean fiat currencies around the world are going to crash. Fiat currency is a currency that's not backed by anything. It's just created out of thin air like we showed earlier. So my preference is land outside of the United States. At this point, you know, some of our members of the coalition may want to add some things relative to that, because we don't want to just talk about the problem. We want to talk about how do we resolve the problem. What can we do so that we're not caught up in this situation? I mean, if you don't believe it's going to happen, obviously you're not going to do anything. But if you see the potential that this has, then common sense would say, I want to do something. Because the major prognosticators that I have read and listened to, they're saying this could happen anytime between now and 2020. So they're saying within the next 5 years, the dollar's going to collapse. So now, what do we do? we do have a pamphlet over there that's available that talks about survival, and that's one of the things that we're working on. But we have to start thinking in terms of how do we survive a crisis that we know is coming. It's not like, you know, a hurricane that might come, you know, when they tell you you're going to get 20 inches of snow and you get, you know, flurries. This is not a thing that might happen. It's going to happen. The only question is when. The only question is when. So, did anyone have, you know, something to say relative to the potential solutions? Again, I'd say those are three situations that you can be in. You know, the urban situation, the rural situation, or somewhere outside of the country. Any questions?
Yes, so when you talk about the pretty much solution of this is to buy some land.
I'm saying that you have to take, if you know that your money, say 5 years from now, is not going to be worth anything, then while your money has some value, that's when you have the opportunity to prepare. And I'm saying land is the only thing that I know of that can provide you with survival needs. Okay, you may not have the greatest house, but at least you can put something together that you can live in. But if you've got some land, you can feed yourself, you can feed your family, and food is going to be that's going to be the primary thing. What happens when either there's no food on the shelves in the supermarket, or there's plenty of food on the shelves in the supermarket and nobody's got enough money to buy it? You've got a problem either way. So food to me would be the first thing, because without food, everything else doesn't matter. If you can't eat. So all the food that I know of comes from the ground. So that to me, would be the primary thing that you have to be concerned with, is having some land that you can actually grow some food that you can survive on.
Well, have anybody looked up some land sellers, somebody that's...
We're actually working on that right now. We're working on it.
So, to summarize what you're saying, are you saying that in 5 or so years, if the dollar collapses, the government will shut down, there will be most likely panic and martial law, and there won't be any options in this country other than to get out?
Well,
is that what you're saying?
Unless you are among the wealthy,
I mean, yeah, besides
you
being
know,
among the wealthy,
unless you're among the
millions
wealthy,
of dollars.
yeah, if you are among the working class, the so-called middle class, then your options will be very few. Because
Like that movie about them counting time, you had it on your arm, and you couldn't buy the time.
oh
you
yeah,
died.
yeah, I know what you're talking about. But yeah, that's what's ahead of us. That's what's ahead of us. Now maybe it doesn't happen in 2020, but it's going to happen. It's going to. Anything that's not sustainable at some point reaches an end. It's not sustainable. And creating money out of thin air at interest just isn't sustainable, because at some point the whole thing crashes. It's literally a Ponzi scheme. It's literally a Ponzi scheme. All Ponzi schemes collapse at some point in time. Any other questions?
I was thinking about that, like, okay, the monetary system drops. So those that are considered wealthy, their wealth consists of the same money that the poor has. So
Yes, but they also have assets. Material.
Right.
Yeah, they have material assets. Okay, they got those material assets. See, one thing I didn't talk about, when people borrow and they forfeit, you know, on their loan, then the banks take their assets. Okay? So, you know, if you miss your car payments, the bank takes your car. Now they go back and sell the car. They've already gotten, you know, so many payments from you anyway. Now they go sell the car, get some more money, but they have physical assets.
Has a study been taken to at least identify what material assets would be like a lifesaver or like in a situation like that?
Well, again, what's the first thing you need to do when you get up in the morning? You eat your breakfast, don't you?
I can brush my teeth.
You have to brush your teeth. But I mean, that's the primary. Food is primary. Food is primary. So food comes out of the ground. So that's why I say the first thing that I would be concerned with is having somewhere where I can grow some food. And to me, that just makes sense. Yes.
I was talking to my husband recently about, we were going into colloidal silver. Because, of course, you cannot eat gold and silver, but you can use it, you know, to heal yourself,
Right.
things like that.
Right.
So, you know, I would like to suggest that everyone look into the healing qualities of those things that are real currency for us, for our bodies, you know, for our currency. Gold, colloidal gold, and colloidal silver, which we're looking into getting now, because it helps you to clean water. It also, making colloidal silver, we can look this up online, how to make colloidal silver. Of course, you have to buy the silver wire, and it's a process, you charge it and all that stuff with the silver ions, and you can heal whatever's happening in your body, your skin, things like that with the silver. So, and water too. Right.
Essentially, we will have to change our way of living.
Right.
We really have to change our way of living, you know, because the lifestyles we're used to living, you know, the creature comforts that we're used to having, they're not going to be available. You know, summertime we used to turn on the air conditioning, you know, wintertime we turn on the, we may be going back to burning wood instead of, you know, these furnaces. We may be going back to a lot of things that we see. What literally I see, and some people may not share this opinion, but America is en route to becoming a third world country. It's en route to becoming a third world country. What we call a third world country. You know, today, for instance, jobs that paid, say, $40,000 a year 10 years ago, if you have experience in that field, you can't get $40,000 a year for that same job today. You can't get the same. So the prices have gone up. Our wages have not gone up anywhere near the rate that prices have gone up. So we're losing money. America doesn't produce anything anymore. There's no steel industry. The automobile industry is such that they have to advertise, Chrysler has to advertise their car as the American import. That's how they advertise their car. Because everybody's driving imported cars. When I was a kid, an imported car, a foreign car was a novelty. Now, foreign cars are what most people drive. So the car industry, there's no, you know, Bud Company used to sell railroad cars. Now they buy railroad cars from Kawasaki. So America has no steel industry. Drive around Philadelphia and look at all the abandoned factories. Drive through Camden and look at all the abandoned factories. You know, they're making condominiums out of all the factory buildings. Condominiums that you and I can't afford. Yeah. Yeah, everywhere.
wanted to ask, actually, I'm in the insurance business, and when I think about, the insurance industry and the economic crisis that you're, speaking about, my concern is how does that affect it? Because insurance is one of the only vehicles that you can actually have. Insurance is one of the only vehicles that you can actually, put your money in tax-free, as well as get a return from it tax-free
Right.
that they allow. And it's the only, it's required by each state that all of the funds that are coming to the account by the insurance company has to be backed by, that their money has to be maintained as opposed to the bank, and they're audited and everything. So I'm wondering if, that might be a safer place in a sense to put money
Put
or,
money?
yeah.
Um,
But I don't know in terms of like the.
I got,
crashing of the
I have
dollar.
3 letters, to respond to that. AIG, the biggest insurance company in the world, was bankrupt and had to be bailed out by the federal government. So it can happen to insurance companies too. They were the biggest in the world. You know, they had, you know, they came up with this idea in 2008, too big to fail. You know, I say it was just too big to go to jail.
If you think about it, insurance is based on risk. The younger and healthier you are, the less it costs. But nowadays, with dietary lifestyles, where people live, where they eat, younger people are dying earlier. We are among the first group of people who are going to see our children die before us. So that was part of the reason why AIG fell, because they're playing the risk game. And the risk, you say, a younger person is going to live a lot longer. But when they start dying in droves at younger ages, they lose money.
They're having heart attacks at 35 years old.
So, now, my question is that.
They're like a living good things.
Okay, that way. Then my question is that did AIG diversify in terms of, putting their money in the stock market, or how, you know, that's one of the problems that I find with some insurance companies, that they went into other areas instead of stayed where they should have been.
Right.
That might, I'm not sure, so I just
Well,
wanted to ask that.
The other thing is, when the dollar is no longer worth anything, it doesn't matter how much money you have. Because, you know, you get your money out, all right, say I've got $100,000. And, you know, $100,000, I've read an estimate that said for a person to retire, to get $50,000 a year in interest, and $50,000 a year today is not a whole lot of money. But to get $50,000 a year in interest, they will have to have $100 million in principal in the bank. So, how many people are going to have $100 million to get $50,000? You know,
Okay.
this was just a statistic I just read the other day.
What percentage?
Exactly.
No, they're not talking about right now. They're talking about as this crisis approaches, that they're going to have to have $100 million. Not right this minute, okay. But as the dollar value begins to fall, see, you weren't here at this point here. You weren't here at this point here. This is the value of the dollar as it's fallen. Okay, that's 2005. That's 1913. Now, 100 years from 1913 to 2013, the dollar went from being worth $1 to being worth a penny. Okay, so now what happens when you have hyperinflation is that, you know, $1,000, I take $1,000 and go buy a loaf of bread and don't get no change. It happened in Germany. They had to go shopping with wheelbarrows full of money to go to the grocery store. That's hyperinflation. So when that happens, how much money you have, unless you're a multi-millionaire, unless you're a billionaire, how much money you have won't save you. It just won't save you. I'll tell you right now, I see your question. I'll tell you right now, the wealthy people in the United States right now are making preparations to leave the United States. They're buying land in South America, in Central America. They're buying land in Africa. The Europeans intend to make Africa a part of Europe. The only black folk will be in there will be to serve the Europeans. That's their plans for Africa. Okay? So they're making plans to leave. We'll be the ones left here scratching our heads talking about what happened.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chart, and it looks like after the slump during the Depression,
Yeah.
the value of the dollar increased.
The value of the dollar increase.
And that's something because you would think that people in poverty equals dollar decrease, but no, it's just the opposite. People in poverty means a stronger dollar.
Right, right. Remember, at that point in time, the money supply decreased. So the value of the dollar increased because the supply, when the supply of money decreases, your dollar becomes worth more. When the supply of money increases, your dollar becomes worth less.
Also, during that time, I mean, not far from World War II. I mean, so war also generates revenue.
Right. That's why wars are bankrupt. All wars are bankrupt. Oh, speaking of the
I'd like to thank Elder Times for the presentation. Can we have a round of applause, please? Very encouraging and informative. And before we take a break, I just want to share one thing with you. I'm a part of the coalition, the Philly-Baltimore Israelite Coalition. So we had the opportunity to preview this presentation prior to tonight. So tell me what you think of this, because this is what came to my mind, because Elder Tom was echoed in this presentation that debt creates money. You heard that a few times, right? So this is what came to my mind when I was critiquing it. The presentation is on an impending financial crisis, or the economic meltdown, or end the economic meltdown. So if you take a minute to give some thought, the global financial picture today and how it trickles down to us everyday people, at best can be described as unstable, with a tendency to trend in the direction favoring the wealthy and oppressing the poor. Now, we have an African-American president in the White House right now. He's implemented programs and processes aimed at leveling the playing field. However, the right wing, politicians that tightly embrace the old colonial Southern mentality consistently put up roadblocks and barriers to filibuster legislation and lynch the hopes of poor people. Now, can't you see that? If money is created out of debt, then they're going to keep us in debt until the system collapses.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Let's take a break. Okay.
One last point, if I may.
Okay.
The brother spoke about debt. Is there anything? Is there anything lower than debt? And there is. Servitude.
Well, the fact is, debt is servitude. Yeah, debt is servitude. We literally, we're all slaves. And the worst kind of slave is a slave that doesn't know he's a slave. You know? Right. And so we're going to take a break and come back with any more questions.
Okay, my name is Adon H. Betty Fry, and I was invited to be a part of the coalition. Even though I'm in Baltimore, I have very close ties to the Philadelphia area. In fact, Bene Zaquin, that's the group that I'm affiliated with on a spiritual basis, also has people here in Philadelphia that belong to the same spiritual organization. But this organization is about bringing leaders together. And to that end, regardless of our differences in doctrine, there are some things that impact us in common. And the two things that we started talking about were what we're going to do about schooling our children and what are we going to do when the economy collapses. So when we have an agenda, each week we talk about how we're going to present it. And the only thing that we can do now is educate people, get to talking so that people that hear it say, well, you know, I've been thinking about that also. Let me come in and sit down and talk with other people who are thinking about this. And that's what this coalition does. And we've been together less than a year, and we've already have an agenda of things to talk about that are really crucial. And it's not just crucial for the Israelite community, it's crucial for anybody of any race, really, that wants to improve their condition as far as the things that we're talking about. Right now we only have the two subjects about the homeschooling. We know that the schools today are really in bad shape, and that was done on purpose to dummy us down. And the disaster that's coming, those of us who know about it can prepare. But if you don't know what's happening, then you can't prepare for it. So that's basically why I'm a part of this coalition. And even though it's Philadelphia, that's just the place where it's going to start. And we're trying to pull in leaders from different regions. It starts in Philly. Now it can branch out into New Jersey, Delaware, Baltimore, going west. So going further up north to New York. So that's where it is. The problem is that a lot of leaders do not want to share their power. And they think that, well, if I join with these guys, then I won't have the influence I have over my flock, because now they're going to see other leaders, and what I've been saying all this time may conflict with what they're hearing now. So a lot of leaders are shy about joining a leadership coalition. To me, that's very selfish, but that's the nature of the beast that we live in.
All right, listen, thank you very much. If people wanted to find out about the Baltimore community, is there anybody to get in touch with, or a website or anything like that?
Yes. Actually, it's the Bene Zaquin.info. That's I'm sorry, hold on. Bene Zaquin is the name of the organization. The website is www.zaquin, ZAQEN.info. And that's where we're at. Lots of information. And the information is not about personalities. It's about history and philosophy, and especially history again, because our main thing is to let the people know, that is to say our people, so-called people of color. Technically, the people that came here as slaves, that's our people. The ex-slave population are the true children of Israel. That's the greatest thing that we could ever know about ourselves, is our history, because as long as you don't know your history, you have no idea of who you are. You're still a very colorable person. You have no real identity. If you ever notice that black history in America starts with America, it starts with us being slaves, they have absolutely no idea. And our children are being taught this black history as if before we came to America, we didn't know who we was. We had no idea. Well, that's done on purpose also. This whole black history thing is done on purpose to keep us dummied down. Our history goes all the way back to the Old Testament, specifically the children of Israel. The children of Israel have a history that goes all the way back to Noah. Noah has a history that goes all the way back to the first man. And that's another thing. We are created beings. We are not evolutionary beings. there was a story, a little boy asked his father, where do people come from? And his father said, well, the Almighty made Adam and Eve, and then from that, everybody else came. And so the little boy went and said, Mommy, where do people come from? And the mother said, well, long time ago, we was monkeys. And the monkeys changed to apes, and then the apes changed into human beings. And that's where people come from. So he went back to his father, and he said, Daddy, Mama said that we came from monkeys. And the father said, well, she's talking about her side of the family.
Yes, we started this organization. It started with the Philadelphia Leadership Coalition. And our objective was to get organizations, Israelite organizations, to communicate because for some reason or another through the past, we have separated and probably fell under that, the crab in the barrel syndrome. And we know that our enemies have also involved in keeping us separated. So that was our main goal, was to get Israelites to communicate. Our second goal was to find common ground where we can work together. And this example of how we can work together, this is one of our first events. Also, we with our first two agendas, we also came up with two pamphlets. And one was homeschooling, because we think that's very important to learn how to educate our kids, because we know that our parents are our first educators. So that was one of the first things that the organization came up with. The second was survival booklet, because we know that any type of catastrophe or economic crisis is coming or soon to come. So we thought that was important and something easy that all our groups can come together on. As I stated earlier, our main objective is to get Israelite leaders to communicate, and the second agenda was to find common grounds where we can work together. We tried to get this organization going, I say a couple of years ago, and we met a lot of obstacles. We finally got the organization together, I would think we've been going strong now, I think, for about 6 months. And what we do is what we call a conference call every Sunday, or what we call Yom Rishon, which means Sunday. We do at 11 a.m. we do a conference call where all the leaders come on and we discuss certain topics and things that we work together on. One of the first persons that I reached out with was a brother from Baltimore who also has a group here in Philadelphia, and I've been knowing him for years, probably back '85, and we always talked about working together. So he was one of the first ones that I reached out to. His name is Elder H. And as of now, we have, let me think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. As of now, we have 6 organizations that are involved, and we're talking to another 4 or 5 organizations we're looking to have on board. So this thing is, we feel is growing. And even though we're Israelites, we are looking to work with any organization that sees the same goal that we're seeing, or somewhere similar that we can work with. So we're looking to work with any organization to be in our group. Again, my name is Ak Kazriel, and I'm actually from the group called the KOY, the Kingdom of God. And Our main organization is in Dimona, Israel. And we have many jurisdictions around the world. We're holding this event at our jurisdiction, the Kingdom of God's jurisdiction here in Philadelphia. This is the Philadelphia jurisdiction. And we're looking to reach out again, I say, to any organization that's looking to reach the same goal that we're reaching. Okay, our organization again is called the Philadelphia Leadership Coalition. With Baltimore, a group for Baltimore is also a part of. Our contact numbers is 267-403-2218.